Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is Wednesday, January 30th, 2013, and I'm Darko. This is my website, ggnonline.com, and on YouTube my channels are ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. That's back up and running now. So the other thing too is worked on a video yesterday, kind of like the last one, the battle cry for a planet of victims. And this one's called or titled Enemies at the Gates of Syria. Go check it out. It's a little under 15 minutes, and I think it's one of the it's the funnest videos I've ever made. A lot of times you have a lot of complications, but this one just kind of worked. And I think it's one of my best videos I've ever made. So check it out and share it if you can. Like if you have a Facebook account, if you do, try to post it on there if you still have that global government news, if you're still a member of that group. But anyways, I'm going to cover all kinds of different articles, mostly the economy in this first one, and some crazy stories in the second or third one. GDP shows surprise drop for U.S. in fourth quarter. So as everybody's talking about how the recession has been gone and we were never in a depression, and that most of the, well not most, but at least a crap load of wealth was consolidated into fewer hands. That's why I call it the Great Wealth Consolidation Operation instead of the Great Recession. The U.S. economy posted a stunning drop of 0.1% in the fourth quarter, defying expectations for slow growth and possibly providing an incentive for more Federal Reserve stimulus, which is not what you want to hear if you're a tax debt slave. The economy shrank from October through December for the first time since the recession ended, hurt by the biggest cut in defense spending in 40 years. So fewer exports and sluggish growth in company stockpiles. U.S. debt headed towards 200% of GDP even after fiscal cliff deal. It says here that the fiscal deal, or the fiscal cliff deal, combined with debt limit agreement of 2011, only slightly delays the U.S. reaching debt to gross domestic product. U.S. debt headed towards 200% of GDP. That's insane. And of course, they always talk about the budget and this debt that will never actually be paid off. That's why you're a debt slave, because we're all debt slaves, right? Because unless, of course, you go to live in the woods, and even then, they'll come try to find you like they did the indigenous people and change your way of life. You have to get on that grid. Perpetual debt is the best way to control people. Manage them, keep them predictable. Inflation unchained, it says U.S. dollar down 23% from 2000, and tuition up 72%, and home values up 44%. It says incomes adjusting for inflation are back to 1990 levels. So with this rigged economy where all these dials can be turned and buttons pushed, and just endless money printing, I saw an article about Obama saying that I'm here to crash the dollar. Like I said, it's not even my own personal opinion. It's actually somebody else's, but it was a good point, which is Obama's there to keep the dollar as the world reserve currency or dollar hegemony. That's his goal. That's his job. So, I mean, if we do see a collapse, it's most likely going to be by design, right? But most likely they're just going to keep it going. Kind of weird because, I'm not like an expert at economics. I know there's people out there that are much more savvy than I am with this. But it's funny how, like, you'll see a lot of people that will talk about economics and they'll try to apply these inflation rules and expenditures and endless money printing stuff. But the problem is, the thing is that they don't understand that they can keep doing this. They can keep this cycle and this system going as long as they want. The only reason I would see them letting it crash is so that they can basically, kind of like when you file bankruptcy, except they won't have to wait. They'll just get instant credit right away and it'll wipe it all clean. Virginia alternative currency plan moves ahead. I think I remember covering this a while back. Commonwealth of Virginia is examining what it would take to have a Plan B currency ready to go in the event of a Federal Reserve meltdown. My purpose is to have a Plan B, he said, so Virginians would be able to conduct commerce without using greenbacks. It's interesting, too, that someone made a good point also, which was that how they always call it commerce, commerce, commerce. I've actually used that term before. But then there's trade. I remember hearing when I was making that little mini documentary there yesterday on Syria, I remember hearing Assad use the word trade. But commerce is what? It's government-controlled trade. Trade is fair trade. I mean, the globalists like to call it free trade, but actually that's just their way of putting a fancy spin on it so they can exploit other less, quote, developed economies. They call it the black market because, they can't get they can't tax it. So, but I'm going to keep moving here. You can go in there and check it out. Links will be posted. China introduced gold exchange traded funds. China's securities regulator has published rules for the operation of gold exchange traded funds ETF, paving the way for introducing such businesses into the country's financial market. There's no set timetable yet for the listing of gold ETFs or mutual funds traded on stock exchanges that track the price of gold. We have the Bank of England ready to set up first G7 yuan swap. So the Bank of England is prepared to become the first G7 central bank to enter into a foreign exchange swap agreement with China, opening the door to another substantial step in moves to liberalize the yuan currency. It would be the latest in a string of bilateral currency agreements that China has signed in the past 3 years to promote the use of the yuan in trade and investment. Then we have nearly half of Americans' households are one emergency away from financial disaster, says a report. Financial disaster. So that's, it's interesting if you want to define that, right? Which is everybody, and not everybody, but I'd say the average American holds about $500,000 in debt. You know what I mean? When it comes down to their mortgages, or way inflated mortgages, of course, too, right? See, that's, man, I'm not going to go into it, but. And then, of course, you got the cars. Everybody just throws away their cars if they get in an accident. Oh, just throw it away. We'll get another one, right? Of course, the credit card debt, which a lot of people go in the cycles, like especially recently after 2008, in order to get by. So this is actually what helped it help prevent the disaster, right? Taking on more debt. But like I said, you can't just detach yourself from the system and try to do things voluntarily. That just won't happen without basically SWAT teams and federal agents and stuff like that. So this one person is one emergency away from not being able to cover his basic needs, but he doesn't fit the stereotype of someone living on the financial edge. So they said nearly 44% of American households don't have enough savings to cover their basic expenses for 3 months in the event of financial emergency, like losing a job or paying for unexpected medical care. According to a recent report, it says here it's changed little from last year. These are households and individuals that are living paycheck to paycheck, and without savings, you're one misstep away from financial disaster. So it goes in there and gives a story about how he works full time, and so does his wife. So his wife's out of the house. The kids are being brainwashed by the state or by religious education, whatever, and they just slave away, pay off their debt, right? And you can never really get ahead. That's what I'm talking about. That's my point. That's funny too, because most people throughout history, especially, Europeans and stuff like that, but, indigenous and stuff like that, they've always had to depend on what? The weather and the harvest and stuff like that. And sometimes it'd be good, sometimes it would be bad. But, as far as disaster, people got by. They would help each other. They were able to survive, go to the farms, get food still, use wood in their stoves or whatever. Everything is so managed. Everything's a business now to be exploited, for anything, that it's hard to really get by. And that's why I said that's what the political law enforcement, not common law, political law enforcement officers or revenue collectors do. They're there to just collect revenue and make sure nobody, goes off the grid. Childhood poverty high in Detroit, but teen pregnancy down. So that's a good thing. Teen pregnancy is down, probably because they're becoming more sterile. It says a new report from the Detroit reveals that in spite of many families with kids that left Detroit between 2000 and 2010, much of the city's population still consists of children living in poverty. 60% of children in Detroit live in poverty per state of Detroit. So, it represents 64% increase in child poverty in the city since 1999. That's pretty crazy. There's Detropia. It's a documentary. You should go check that out. Pretty interesting. It's an interesting situation they got going on in Detroit. They have around 50% unemployment. I guess it just goes to show you when you put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, with the car manufacturing, and then the country does, the government does everything it can to kill the car industry, that, and then at the same time bail it out. They call it bailing it out. It's like you're left with what they have there. All right, then we have let's cut welfare when kids get bad grades. So, you got to go in there and get indoctrinated to be a good taxpayer, right? So he sparks a debate, right? But people will support this, of course, right? It may not get passed, but so they introduced legislation that would slash welfare benefits for parents who get crummy grades. So who basically you can interpret as reject the programming, In high school, I probably could have got really good grades, but I didn't because I didn't care anymore. In grade school, I did because I still believed in everything, but I was starting to see through the crap in high school, and you know what, I'll just do what I got to do to get by and then to be able to get in the Marine Corps. He said the bill will inspire parents to do a better job. We're not asking children to rewrite the Magna Carta. A D- gets you through. Yeah, this is what's so sick about it too. It's like you got to pressure them to study when there's no food or on the dinner table. See, you see how they equate that? That's part of the program that we've, becoming, quote, civilized, right? Is that there's food all around, but you have to go get a job. You have to work in this collective. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with collectivism. It's just that a corporation, you work as a collective, but you don't really own anything. You don't have co-ownership, so they can just cut you whenever they want. And all of a sudden, you lose your corporate sharecropping job, and you're starving. 48% chance you're overqualified for your job, assuming that you have your bachelor's degree, says a new study. So in 2010, 5% of all janitors, 15% of cab drivers, and 25% of retail sales clerks had bachelor's degrees, USA reports. And all 48% of working college graduates had jobs in 2010 that did not require a bachelor's degree, and 37% had jobs that only require a high school diploma. Remember the janitor? There was actually a bunch of janitors with PhDs. This is interesting. If you get a degree in business administration, which was what I was advised and which I went into in the beginning of college, and I ended up changing it to journalism. I realized it doesn't really exist too much. You may not necessarily walk into a middle-class life. There's a good chance you may end up being a bartender. And that's interesting because the Yahoo put out that crappy propaganda article about the top 5 careers, and they took all the interesting ones and said, no, you can't survive off that. And then they gave you ones like law enforcement and education and psychology, and the other one was business administration. So China, millions of people getting useless degrees want office jobs that don't exist. So it says wait until significant numbers of these men are unable to find wives and the option of working in the factories goes away. So jobs go begging in factories, while many uneducated young workers are unemployed and underemployed. A national survey of urban residents released this winter by a Chinese university showed among young people in the early 20s with college degrees were 4 times as likely to be unemployed as those with only an elementary school education. So it says there's a structural mismatch. On one hand, the factories cannot find skilled labor. And don't worry, the U.S. will send them over too, and they'll train you, and then they'll be out of a job. And on the other hand, the universities produce students who do not want the jobs available. And I'll probably finish up with this article. This is an opinion article, or op-ed, whatever. It says here, Outlandish college courses, the public school's dirty dozen. They say it's one thing for students at places like Harvard University and Duke to enroll in frivolous courses, even at a time when college costs and youth unemployment are alarmingly high. It's quite another thing altogether when blatant liberal bias appears constantly in classrooms at taxpayer-subsidized universities. It goes on here, it says, and it's another thing when the other side simply isn't represented. The anti-capitalists, race-based, orthodox feminist, and global warming-themed courses found at virtually every prestigious public university would be far less disturbing if they were offset by a discussion of conservative ideals. Professors consistently ignore the likes of Hayek and Milton Friedman. Instead, students are routinely left to study John Maynard Keynes and assigned readings by Karl Marx. It says began in 1995, the Dirty Dozen. Since then, the Young America's Foundation has publicized courses at public universities such as How to Be Gay and apparently a perennial favorite of all, Black Marxism, University of California, Santa Barbara. They prepare young people for the job market in a complex Western economy, but they offer little real-world value at all the outside of the academic bubble of college campuses. So the Daily Caller concludes its presentation of the Young Americans Foundation's The Dirty Dozen, this time for elite public schools. The schools offering these courses are all ranked in the top 50 by U.S. News & World Report. University of Wisconsin-Madison Gender and Women's Studies Lesbian Culture is one of them. So basically, it says here, critically analyzes the concept of lesbian perspective theory and sensibility. University of Texas has Black Marxism. Then we have College of William and Mary Economics, Government Regulations of Business. So it analyzes the principles and purposes of government regulation of business, because you got to have it. I'll leave off here. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.